Hello, my name is Eisen. Hope you're having a good one, and this is going to be a Lara specific guide to BM for Laras from a Lara. The reason why I wanted to make this video is for two reasons. One, when I was learning BM and BM solo practice, there was not a lot of Lara guides to figure out how to run this boss with Lara specific skills and what the class can and can't do. Because of that, I went into those bosses knowing the knowledge of Black Mage, but not the knowledge of Lara and its skills specifically. But now that I've gone through that process of going through BM, liberating, and soloing the boss myself, I feel like I have some sort of idea to teach people certain things that they might not specifically use in this boss, but may seem very, very helpful for them now that they know that it's a possibility. A second reason is because I've seen a lot of support talking about how people use these videos and they like some coconut Wi-Fi that I posted a year ago. And because of those people, I've made this video and I hope you enjoy it. Anywho, let's get into what I'll be using. I will be using this script that will tell me specifically the timestamps of what I want to talk about. And I will be using two of my BM solos that I did around 2 to 3 months ago. I am just using these BM solos so I can show you guys visuals of what I'm talking about specifically. Now, what will this video be talking about specifically? So there's going to be two parts. One's going to be a more basic general talk about Lara. This entire video will be basic, but it'll talk about specifically Lara's survival movement abilities, how to DPS as Lara in my opinion, and what you can do to increase your damage over the time of the boss. The second part is going to be solo differences that you have. So this is for the BM solo players that really want to get it through and try to get it clear. The reason why I bring this up is because New Age is in 4 months and I am expecting there to be an influx of players who want to try and solo BM. So that part will be more directed to them. But people that are Laras and a party comp can still look into that stuff to find out more about how to increase your damage at a more risky level and possibly gain more DPS to the point where you are able to clear with a party that might be struggling. Anywho, the first thing I would talk about specifically is the survival guide that it has. This survival includes its abilities that it has on top of its movement capabilities that it has. The first thing we will talk about is Mount Embrace. What is Mount Embrace specifically? Well, if we go over here to my green mushroom area, Mount Embrace is a ability where it reduces the amount of damage you take from max HP skills by 55%. And although that is good by itself, the thing that makes it incredibly good is this hyper skill specifically, which is that it creates a shield to 15% max HP every 1 second while it's active. So I will show you an example of how this works. You gain a shield every 1 second and it keeps going and going and going, and it goes through the shield before your HP. Now, what use cases does that have? That is a very good question that I was not aware of. Well, a good example is chains in BM. So if I go over here, if you look at this example, I am in the middle of lightning. Although you have the ability to jump around and dodge the chains, this is just an example if you want to tank chains. It's also because I didn't play this part particularly perfect. So if you see here, I get hit twice, and I am down to around 66% of my HP. I got kind of chipped, like I got hurt a lot. And to combat this, I pressed my Mount Embrace button. Now watch my HP number. Multi-chains happen, so multiple chains are hitting me at the same time, and my shield barely goes down. Barely goes down. Which indicates not only will you probably not lose your shield, you'll probably gain shield over time and it will never touch your HP bar, even if you get 1 tick of shield without getting hit. A more visual example of how crazy this is with cat eyes. Cat eyes, what I think they are, is these purple things in the sky that hit you and kind of home on you when it hits you. Now, look at my HP bar, look at the shield, and you will see how strong this is. The shield is going up while I'm getting hit. It just can't do enough damage to break the shield, and I just tanked the entire thing. The only reason why I went down in the HP is because it expired. So that should just show you the ability that it has in tanking chip damage. It tanks chip damage very, very well. I think it's its best use case. But it can also tank big HP percents like purple lasers or blue lasers stacked on top of each other for P3. I wouldn't recommend to do this, and I will show you an example why later in the video. Now, another thing I recommend learning / using is your Dragon Vein traces. Now, what is that exactly? That is your TP skill that Lara has. Lara is innately a flash jump character, but it has TP capabilities. Now, this TP ability is very strange in terms that it's based on charges. So this charge is the amount of times that you can TP pressing the skill. And it goes down when you use it, and it comes back up once every 6 seconds. A good thing to keep in mind for this skill is that the direction you are facing and the direction that you are holding your movement key in, so I'm holding up right now, dictates where you are going to TP specifically. So I'm facing right, I just press the TP skill, I TP right. I look left, I press the TP skill, I TP left. If I hold up, which you can't necessarily see, but I'm holding it, I go up. Even if I'm right next to a vein, if I TP up, I TP up. I can also hold up left. I would have gone to that, but this was closer. And you can hold down to go below. This is just a basic example of this. Now, how do you use it in BM specifically? Well, let's go through one example over here in P2. Let me swap this, because this is definitely an error I made last time. A lot of things are happening on the screen right now. A lot of things. I'm moving left because I want to also get increase in DPS. I'm over here. Oh no, I completely forgot about rollings because I didn't time it right. Now, what could I do here? I could flash jump. I could Will of Erda Eform to prevent getting hit. Or, the more conservative option, I just TP right. TP right, dodge it. If I flash jump, there was a chance that I got hit by the purple. Got hit by white, maybe could have taken 2 lives by getting a cursed death and an actual death, but I think I would have just died from the rolling. Regardless, that saved me by using that TP skill. Now, another example of this is using it in an aggressive option. Now, what does an aggressive option mean? So for this example, I used it to get away from a dangerous situation. This is a method of using it to where you gap close. So a good example of this is BMP3. Rollings are happening. I don't want to be on the right because there's a possibility I can get kicked. So I flash them to the left and I'm outside of the bubble. I am not doing a lot of damage at all when I'm outside of this bubble. So what I attempt to do is I press the erupt key so that it's up, and I TP in instantly so I gap close and I don't need to flash jump in and take more time to get into the bubble. Instead, I'm immediately in the bubble, I have the time to react to kick, and I duck it. That is a way of gap closing. Another example of this I can show is in the first VOD at, the number says 2318. You see how he is already prepping his kick in this scenario? Me doing this would be very bad if I didn't have a TP, because I would get kicked 100% in this scenario, and there's a chance that the rolling hits me and I get a curse. Or not a curse, but I could die just from getting hit by white, or get knocked back into a purple debris over here on my mouse, and I just take a curse death. I can possibly take 2 lives here. But what I do here instead is TP to the vein and I duck. Because I did that, not only did I save myself from getting kicked, I am actually in the bubble doing more DPS, and I am safe entirely. You can also use it in different ways by TPing left, TPing right to dodge certain things. But I also feel like that getting into those scenarios by yourself and realizing what these things can do will help you a lot. I can only show you so much, but really getting in there and putting in the practice is what you need to do. Now I will show you an example of Eform and its use cases. Eform is an ability where it tanks your HP for the amount of times that you get hit. So if certain things have high HP percentage, like purple lasers, they won't necessarily do more because it's just one big hit. So it's more... It has a higher use case to use for like one-shot things like whites and purple lasers in comparison to Mountain Embrace, which is just a max HP cut. And you're able to actually move in Eform. In comparison to Mountain Embrace, you can only tank it. So an example of this Eform here is coming up over here. I'm in the wrong video. I'm sorry. 21, 23. Oh, I'm here. Perfect. An example of this, if you've been playing Mage, if this is the most cheese thing you can do, you just Eform down FMA. Be completely safe. An actual example of using this is at 2648. This is talking more about the tanking the higher HP percent abilities. So that does 50% of your HP. And if I get hit by that again, I die. If this hits me, I die. But instead, I use my Eform ability to tank it. And instead, I just take a cut in mana, which I still live with. But I live in exchange, which I think is a wonderful trade. And an example of what you can use with Will of Erda, by the way, if you don't know what Will of Erda is specifically, it is a way that it prevents you from gaining abnormal status. So if you were to get, let's say, kicked here in P3, you would not take a white curse if you popped your Will of Erda and it was still active. It's a very good way of preventing curse deaths, especially since curses also skill lock you. Not only can it prevent one death, but it can also prevent maybe even two. This is what I would say is the... not the most practical thing you can do, but a very efficient thing you can do if you're in a really bad scenario, which is using Will of Erda and Eform to get through patterns that you might not want to flash jump through. So I have Roar up here, and instead of flash jumping through, which I probably could have done in this scenario, instead I use Will of Erda and I Eform. I duck that so I don't get knocked back. Rollings hit me, but I don't take a curse. If you can see here. The reason why is because I popped Will of Erda. I go through, I'm completely fine, and I'm continuing to do DPS because I'm stuck in here. I'm still in the bubble. That is an example of the survivability clause. Now, how can you DPS as Lara? To be honest, it is very simple in nature, but it's also very difficult to pull off. Remember that summon uptime is your friend. You're able to see it in the upper right corner of what is up and what isn't up. In this example, I didn't have water up until I just procced it. You want to have all three up as much as possible, as well as not spamming specifically the water and the wind skill. I will show an example of that. So let's say that for some reason, so you see how fire hits specifically there? Let's wait for a mushroom to spawn here. Okay. You see how this doesn't hit instantly? Like, it takes a while for it to pop up? If I were to do something like this, right? It takes a while for the ability to go off. So I would recommend to keep the summon uptime as much as possible for the water and the wind. And you can spam fire up if the option is there. Quick note, I didn't bring up this fact in the video, but you should be incorporating autos into your damaging process. If you think about a BA, you deal around 9 to 11% in your autos, and although it might not be comfortable to do it in BM, you should be doing it in BM because you are trying to do as much damage as you can. And although it might be uncomfortable and it's a lot safer to just throw up 3 summons and just prep for either chains or ducking in P3, you should incorporate adding that because the amount of DPS that you're gaining just through auto attacks is incredible. And on top of that, when New Age comes out, the first ever patch you're going to get is for Essence Sprinkle. It's not for your summons. So because of that, you really should start to learn to weave in your autos more in this boss because it only gives you more benefit the more you use it. That's all I have for that additional thought. That is what I believe you can do. But at the end of the day, you can do whatever you want. This is just a general guide that I have and I wanted to share to you guys. Another thing you should be doing is popping your 60s when you can. So if you look at my abilities, I am popping them as soon as I possibly can. As you can see, my Mountain Ridge is coming up. I should be popping it soon. Should be. Popped it there. Different clauses like that. I definitely just died there, but you want to be popping your 60s as much as you can. Another thing you should be doing is upkeeping your buffs. This applies to a party very well because if you were to pop this damage buff on all of your allies, it's a 25% damage buff. So imagine that 6 of you got the equivalent of nearly a full G skill of damage percentage. That is what that gives you. It's not small. It is definitely a big chunk and can help you in the long run. Now here is not a hot take, but a take. Your wind swing, I will say it right now, it is nowhere near as important as the damage percent. The reason why is because although it gives you an attack speed boost, and it can be used to levitate you over the rollings and stuff like that, it is very difficult to use in this patch. So let me show you an example here. The wind ability, you need to hold up and your flash jump key to get on this. And although you might know that ability, what are the odds that your teammates know this ability? I can imagine them auto-attacking, and then they just accidentally get stuck in this when they're trying to flash jump out or something like that. It's very easy to not understand what this wind swing does. And because of that, I think it's more of a detriment to your party in comparison to a benefit. They could learn it, which would be very helpful, but there's a likely chance that they aren't going to learn it as much as you do. But there's also going to be a patch where you can turn it on and off, so this information is less likely to stick in the long term. Now that I bring up that DPS stuff, I'm going to talk about specifically the solo differences in this boss. So if you're wanting to solo this boss, I got you. This is P1 Black Mage, and I just wanted to talk about the differences between party and solo. So when it comes to party, let me show you an example. Parties have a lot of variance in terms of who loads in first, who it aggroes, who it doesn't aggro, and it can get very messy. Two swords can aggro different people. A lot of things can happen in this scenario. In solos, you're the only person that can aggro. So because of that, you can think of it as it is less likely to do certain scenarios. Like, it's not going to dive to a random place on the map. It's going to dive at specific points. With that information, you're able to discern what swords will do. Not all of the time, but a lot of the time. So in this scenario, I see that I am next to white, and in my screen, I can see black. What do I think black can do in this scenario? What I think black can do in this scenario is either dash to me or dive to me. The most likely scenario it does is dive to me. What do I believe it can't do? I don't believe it can do the knockback attack, where like it swings its hilt. The reason why is because I'm not in range, so why would it do that? There's nobody there to aggro it or to get hit by it, so there's no reason that it should do it. What can white do in this scenario? White, I believe, could dive to black, or just dive in general. It could do the knockback attack, Or the unlikely scenario is that it dashes. I personally believe that it shouldn't dash in this scenario because I'm close enough to where I believe that it should prioritize hitting me with a knockback skill. It stays there. I flash jump away. Now I feel like if it were to dash in this scenario, it's probably likely that it happens. Like I like if it dashes, it dashes. It dashes. Now in this scenario, I think okay, black is very likely to dash in this scenario, if not dive. And white is very likely to either knock back or dive. It's less likely that it'll dash. Uh-oh, it dashed. That sucks. I bound it though, and I bound it after black dashed and before white started the dash animation to move, so they both stood still. This is not consistent across Maplestory like locations in the world. There is a very likely chance that where you live or where somebody else lives, that when I hit this bind, the black sword comes towards me, but the white sword is all the way off the screen and I don't get my burst off. There is a world that happens, and that sucks. But it's also something that you should be aware of based on where you live. It was very unlikely with my ping that I would have that issue, so I was fine with having this bind happen. Anywho, I did the most whammo thing I did. Boom, I blinked. Why did I blink? Here's my reaction to that. Oh my god, I whiffed. Oh my god, I whiffed. That was nasty. Anywho, if you want to learn how to DPS, I would recommend to separate swords. On your every 60, you can use your Mountain Ridge to get chip damage. If you look here, I popped it instantly. And when the Mountain Ridge gets over there, it actually just chips it. And it's just an example of what you can do. On to P2. For P2 and P3, what I believe is the best thing to keep in mind is think about how often you are spending dodging and how often you are spending actually hitting the boss and getting your 60s off. In a solo run, the only damage is from yourself. And if you are a low damage clear, let's say, I will say low damage clear is anything above 52 minute, low 50s, anything above that is a min clear, in my opinion. The way that you increase your DPS, even if you feel like you're getting all of your bursts down correctly, is learning how to DPN better. So if you see over here, I am weaving in autos as much as I can. What I should be doing here is getting hit by Black Curse, so I also increase the damage that I deal. When you have a Black Curse above your head, you actually deal an increased 10% FD. This Black Curse over here gives you a 10% FD increase, while the White Curse gives you a minus 10% FD decrease. The only issue with Black Curse on you is that it does not allow you to heal, so keep that in mind. And that is the specific thing about P2 and P3, is remembering how, or thinking to yourself how long you are away from the boss and how much of that time of the boss you're actually hitting it. It's like right over there, I didn't spend too much time moving around, but if I held blink and I stayed up there, it would have been a very long time. That's just an example of that. In P4, which I'll go back to P3 in a bit, but P4 is very similar in that example where you want to worry about DPSing. DPSing, you can, remember, pop your 60s on time, make sure it's always up, make sure you always rebuff on your wind skill and your sunlight skill to give yourself that attack speed and that damage increase. It is very similar across those three phases. When you want damage, you're trying to think about how long you are away from the boss and how much damage you're actually dealing in your burst. Making sure you have Black Curse on, or making sure you don't have White Curse on. There are little things that you can optimize that will increase your damage overall. My first run was a 53-minute time, and with the same gear, I was able to PB a 38. Don't have it on YouTube, so it actually technically doesn't exist. But even if you were to count as the 46-minute run to only be the other comparison, the same gear, I was still able to cut off 6 minutes of my time. no gear change, if you were to not even include the 38-minute one that I did. Now, I'm going to go back to survival tips, specifically talking about Eform versus Mountain Embrace. I'm trying to find an example of when I use Eform. So you can use Eform here, but there are certain instances where you should not Mountain Embrace. I'm trying to find a really bad super pattern. So here's an example. Okay. So you see over here how there's a super? You could tank it. But what you need to realize is that BM's going to kick you. So if you were to Mountain Embrace, I didn't explain this part also. So Mountain Embrace has a thing where it prevents you from getting abnormal status, but that does not count BM kick. So if I were to Mountain Embrace here, although I would tank this purple really well, I would take a curse death here, and therefore take a life off my counter going from 10 to 9. This is an example of where you just tank it. The reason why you tank it is because if you were to hold Mountain Embrace there, yeah, you would take less HP damage, but you take a curse death because you get hit by White Curse by the kick. So that kind of shows you the difference of when you should use Mountain Embrace and when you shouldn't. I recommend using it on lasers when you're outside of the bubble if you ever get that rare case, which is very unlikely, but that is what I believe is a case that you can use it on. I clearly don't use Mountain Embrace that often. I was trying to find an example, but it looks like I can't. Anywho, I think last thoughts on, let's say that you are similar to me and you're finding it very, very difficult to DPS this boss down. There are certain hurdles that come down to, I feel like I can't do enough DPS. Like, all of this feels very difficult. At the end of the day, BM is an incredibly difficult boss. It's one of the hardest bosses in the game. It's not easy at all to learn, and it's a lot of hurdles I need to go through. Although I can tell you all of this stuff, and all of this stuff's going to be out, you can rewatch the video. The best thing you can do is just go out and try it. Get your toes a little wet. Die a lot, but at the same time, you will get into these scenarios where you will understand, to a higher extent of me, it's very easy to get to that point where you just understand a certain scenario and you're like, oh, I messed this up 4 times. It's because I did these things. Let me try something different. And maybe that 5th time, you get it done. Or maybe that 5th time, you don't get it done. Regardless, you're gaining experience from all of the fails that you do throughout this boss. So whether it's from a party, from doing it solo, time is what it takes, and I believe that you can get it done through the practice of going through those trials and getting all those errors out of the way. Anywho, that is all I got for this video. Very long one, 26 minutes. Sorry about that, but I hope you have a good one. I am willing to make another video that is a little shorter and condensed, but for the people that want this, I sent it out. If there are specific things that you'd like to talk about that I didn't cover in this video, you can put it in the comments. But that's all I got today. Hope you have a good one, and I hope to see some Lara BM party clears or even a solo, because that would be very impressive and I would be psyched to see it. Anywho, later.